Seventh graders, Mr. Themes here again. Today we're going to be looking at volume and we're looking at a particular shape or shapes. We're going to be looking at cubes and rectangular prisms and finding the volume of both of those. So right now, real quick, let's mark up our learning targets. The first learning target is we're going to be able to apply the formula, which is volume equals length times width times height, to find the volume of prisms. We're applying formulas to find volume. And then second one, we're finding the volume of both cubes and right rectangular prisms. So just as a reminder, hopefully we already know that volume is a measure of the amount of space a solid occupies, or it's the amount of space a shape takes up. It's measured in cubic units, so we're always going to write our answer like this, or cubic inches, or cubic feet, or cubic centimeters, but it's always going to be written with this exponent of 3, because that means it's cubic measurement. This first shape right here is actually a cube. This is a cube because you'll notice that all 3 sides are the same. They all are, in this case, length A. A cube is where all sides are exactly the same length. Imagine that this cube got filled up with, let's say, water, right? Volume is the amount of space that is or amount of water that could fit inside of this cube. If this water were to fill up with this cube were to fill up with water, that measure would be its volume. This second figure here, the second shape here, is what we're going to call a right rectangular prism. Notice that the dimensions are the length, the width, and the height. Length, width, and the height. This makes a rectangular prism. Imagine that this shape is filled up with, let's say, sand. The amount of sand that can fit inside of it is called the volume. And that's the measure that we're finding when we do length times width times height of this shape. Let's look at a couple examples. For number 1, this is a cube. It says find the volume of the cube. Since this is a cube, we know that all the sides, the length, the width, and the height are all 7 inches. We're always going to start with our formula, so everyone right now needs to write down the formula. Volume equals length times width times height. And we're just going to plug our numbers in. The length, and it really doesn't matter which one's the length, the width, and the height. But the length is usually this direction, 7, so we'll plug in 7. And I'm going to use parentheses when I plug in the width. The width is also 7. And the height is 7. So you're going to need your calculator for these. 7 times 7 times 7. Let's see, 7 times 7 is 49, and then 49 times 7 is, what do you guys know that off the top of your head? It should be 343, and remember to put your units inches cube or cubic inches. Circle that final answer, please. Notice I started with my formula, I plugged in my numbers, and then I evaluated or solved it. For number 2 here, I'll do number 2 along with you. This is another cube, so if the length is 2 1/3 feet, then we know that also the width is 2 1/3 feet, and then the height is also 2 1/3 foot. Now, this is a little tricky because you're going to need a calculator for this. You could use fractions and multiply with fractions, but let's go ahead and just convert this to a decimal. So 2 1/3, let's see, if we put this as an improper fraction, that would become 7/3. So you could put that into your calculator. You could do 7 divided by 3 and you could get it as a decimal. Or you could just look at this fraction part, 1/3, and we know that it's going to be 2 point something. 2 1/3 in your calculator, should hopefully memorize this, is 0.3 repeating. So 2 1/3 feet is 2.33333 repeating feet. Notice that in your directions it says round to the nearest tenth. So we're going to round to the nearest tenth in this, and we're just going to use 2.3 on some of these. But again, to solve this, we're going to start by writing our formula. Volume equals length times width times height. And we're going to plug in 2.3, and you could do 2.333 even more. 2.3 times 2.3 times 2.3. Okay, Now, wrote down the formula, plugged in the numbers. Now we're going to solve. So to solve for this, when you multiply that, you should get 12.649. Since we're rounding here, notice that since we're rounding, that this 9 actually rounds the 4 up to a 5. So it's this 5 then rounds the 6 up to a 7. So our final answer would be 12.7, and this is feet cubed, or cubic feet. 12.7 cubic feet is the total volume that cube takes up. I want you guys to press pause, and I want you to do the same thing now on your own for number 3 and number 4. Press pause. Number 5. Now this is a word problem, number 5. It says a cube has an edge length of 4.3 meters. So since it has an edge length, we could draw this. It's always helpful to draw. So you could draw a little cube here. My cube's not going to be perfect, but all the sides of this cube are going to be the same, 4.3. So when we're plugging in or using our formula, we would again write down volume is equal to length times width times height, and we just plug in 4.3 into all three of these because it's a cube and all three sides are the same. Again, use your parentheses when you plug in these numbers. I think that's the easiest and the best way to do it when you're plugging in numbers. So when you multiply 4.3 times 4.3 and you use your calculator, you should get 79.507. Round this to the nearest tenth again, and this one would just remain 79.5, and this is meters cubed, or cubic meters. So your final answer would be 79.5 cubic meters as the volume that cube takes up. Press pause and do number 2 now on your own. For number 2, you're going to need to convert this to a decimal, so convert 2.5 to a decimal. Press pause and do number 6. Okay, for number 7 now, starting back on number 7, you notice we no longer have cubes. Now we have rectangular prisms like we talked about in the beginning. So for this, we just need to identify the length, the width, and the height. So this would be the length, this would be the width, and this number would be the height. So we're going to use those numbers when we plug in our answers into our formula. So volume is equal to length, width, height. Though we start by writing your volume. The length is 15. The width is 8, and the height is 12. So when you use your calculator and do 15 times 8 times 12, you should get 1,440. And that would be our answer. We just need to make sure we put millimeters cubed, or cubic millimeters would be your final answer. That is the volume that this rectangular prism takes up. For number 8, we have fractions here again, so we need to make sure we convert these into decimals. So a half, that's just 0.5. 3.5 here is 3.5. And then we use 2. So when we're labeling these again, this would be the length, this would be the width, and this would be the height. So we're going to write our formula. Volume is equal to length, width, height. Plugging in our length, which is 3.5. Plug in our width, which is 0.5. And plug in our height, which is 2. So when we multiply that, we would get our answer of 3.5. And it's 3.5 feet cubed, or 3.5 cubic feet is the total volume of this right rectangular prism. Number 9, last one. Again, fractions. Guys, we need to convert these into fractions. We need to convert them into decimals. They are currently fractions. 0.75 is what 3/4 is. If you have like 3/4, 75 cents, so that's 0.75. This would be 0.5 again, and this is 1.5. So we're plugging in our numbers into our formula. Volume is equal to length, width, height. Our length is 0.75. Our width is 0.5. I'm just going to put 0.5. Whoops, that's not very good. 0.5. And then our height is 1.5. Use your calculator. You multiply all of those. and you should get 0.5625. Round it to the nearest tenth, which in this case is this place here. So looking one back, the 6 is going to round it up. So since that rounds it up, we should get a final answer of 0.6 inches cubed. So the total volume that this rectangular prism takes up is 0.6 cubic inches. That's how you find volume, guys. It's pretty straightforward. I want you to press pause, and I want you to do 10, 11, and 12 on your own. And then I would also like for you to go on and do 13 and 14 on your own and answering those questions. You can do them all. When you get done with these guided notes worksheets, I want you to move on to the IXL assignment that you have, and I want you to follow the directions of your teacher. I hope you guys learned a lot on this lesson to find how to find the volume of both cubes and right rectangular prisms. Thank you so much for listening. If you see me and you need a pencil, I have pencils for you. Guys, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you later.